live and everybody's hearing us, which is a good thing for them, I think. And I want to welcome everybody onto the call. So this will be good. All right, so we're about ready to go here. Let me just say to everybody that's on, if you want to text message or email people about getting on, don't forget to do that. That's often, particularly for this call, even if people get on 5-10 minutes into the call, they will get more than their money's worth. We guarantee it. So you might want to just take a couple of minutes and do that and stand by. Okay, we're just at 9 o'clock right now, so we are about to begin.
The recording has started.
My name is Dennis Steed, and I want to welcome you all to tonight's Fireside Chat with Lyndon LaRouche for Thursday, November 5th. This is 2 days after the re-election of Donald Trump to the White House. That election has not yet been ratified. There is instead an attempt to ratify a theft. Now, whether that happens or not is in large part going to be determined by how you respond to this call tonight and how those that you reach out to respond to you. Now, the American electoral process, when honestly conducted and honestly concluded, is a true wonder of the world. It's indeed possible for individuals with no significant wealth, privilege, or hereditary power to come to a position of sovereignty and authority, and to be deployed on behalf of the electorate and people of the United States. Restoring that electoral process to its earlier purity and grandeur is a central intention of all the presidential campaigns that Lyndon LaRouche did. He did 8 of them from 1976, and his last campaign was 2004. For some of us, this is a kind of deja vu situation because 1976, 4 decades and 4 years ago, in that Carter-Ford election campaign, some of us were in a very similar circumstance. And we have more knowledge and more tools at our disposal tonight than we had then. We also have a better president now than we had then. Donald Trump is not Gerald Ford. Both of those presidents, Ford and Trump, were reelected. Ford chose not to fight. Trump has chosen to fight. So the first thing to say tonight is that, like Ben Franklin said about the idea of the republic, we have been given a victory if we can keep it. Now, to help keep this, one thing I want to announce, which Barbara doesn't know about yet, is the activation of our Psychological Warfare Inoculation Bureau. This is basically an anti-bullshit task force. The idea is we track not just data or trends, but patterns of lying in the media, in think tanks, in other institutions, like the colleges, for example, and we have to hold these up to ridicule. And this is done so that we can help people keep their perspective on what is actually going on. For example, everybody's now clear that for the second election in a row, the pollsters have all proven to have been only engaged in the same exercise that ex-New York reporter and CNN commentator Jeffrey Toobin was caught engaging in. During the Zoom call, I think you all heard about that. He exposed himself, as well as all of the election pollsters, as just limp. Well, you get the idea. As we said in a petition we put up some years ago now called President Trump Declassify All Documents and Information Concerning British Subversion of Your Campaign, we pointed out then that Obama's CIA Director John Brennan had convened the illegal task force at the CIA to go after Trump in the first place. And that had come off the work of British spy Christopher Steele and Sir Richard Dearlove and all those people. But you want to remember that John Brennan, Michael Hayden, James Clapper, these guys have been employed as TV newsies, as they call them, senior national security analysts and so forth. That was Brennan over at NBC News, and then CNN has Clapper and Michael Hayden. And as Kirk can tell you, when you have these guys giving you the as commentators, you're dealing with psychological warfare against the population. There's an old National Security Decision Directive, I think, called number 77 that talks about something called public diplomacy. So that's why we need such a thing. Now, we requested those of you who want to help us take this opportunity to clean up the woefully corrupt practices that have now taken over portions of the American elections. You can help us establish our committees of correspondence. And the idea is that the integrity of the elections, everywhere has to be protected. I was talking earlier to Larry Johnson, a former CIA officer, and he just referenced this. He said, if people get the idea that the corruption of the institutions is so great that they truly cannot expect their vote to be sacrosanct, they will decide to take the law into their own hands. And that's exactly what we don't want. We'll be talking about some of the plans that are made for D.C. and other areas a little bit later tonight. But we want to be very clear. Our intent is to simply make sure to do what we can do to make sure that we do not allow the victory that got achieved to be hijacked. Now, one element of what we want to be doing is to transmit the organizing process among the many thousands of people who are still out there right now doing various things to keep themselves activated. Now, of course, our organization does that every day. But we want to be very clear that if this battle has to be fought until January 20th, and I don't think it is going to have to go that long, it will not only be fought and won, but the forces that are fighting it can recruit many that can be caused to recognize the error they may have made by supporting a secret government apparatus around what is called, euphemistically, the Biden-Harris campaign. This is not Honduras. This is not Guatemala. This is not Ukraine. And we just want to make sure that people stay active. One of the things, for example, that came up on an earlier conference call tonight is that we know of a couple of individuals. For example, one couple received 12 ballots in the mail. They contacted the Board of Elections, and the board said, well, just fill out 2 of them. And and they apparently have several of these ballots still in their possession. So one of the things that was suggested is, hey, do a short video, get it to us. Let's get a lot of people who have actual evidence like that. Just send us something. But the concept would be to make a kind of montage of this stuff, not for the purpose of proving the fraud, but showing the country what's going on and what all of the citizens are finding all over the country. You have to imagine what that does to give people the idea of what it is that we have as a power to hold up and to expose. So we just want to be clear. We're not trying to do our job to replace what's already been done by the Trump campaign. What we want to do is simply help supply the motivation that our friends and neighbors are going to need to do what we are doing every day. And so we've qualified ourselves for this over many years. Remember that with Lyndon LaRouche's own persecution by the same apparatus that stopped him from getting votes in every one of his elections, former Attorney General Ramsey Clark said it was a broader range of deliberate and systematic misconduct and abuse of power over a longer time in an effort to destroy a political movement and leader than any other federal prosecution in my time or to my knowledge. Now, that's exactly what Trump was taken through with the impeachment and pre-impeachment. So we wear that condition that Attorney General Clark described as a badge of honor. And we're giving you now an opportunity to join us as well as the president in dismantling this apparatus. A lot of us have known about it for a long time, but now we have a chance to actually show it to everyone in the country. And so, to give us a conception of where we stand in the present battle, we're going to start out with Barbara Boyd. Everybody, many of you probably know her at least, maybe all of you don't. As the author of Robert Mueller is an amoral, illegal assassin. He will do his job if you let him, as well as much of what appears on the LaRouchePAC site. And then following her, we'll be hearing from Kirk Wiebe, former senior technical analyst at the National Security Agency. So, Barbara.
Sure. The way I'm going to start tonight, I just posted a piece to the LaRouchePAC website this afternoon. It's called Now, Let's Defeat the Color Revolution in Progress. And the premise of that piece is very simple, that what you've been watching on TV for the past 24 hours and, in terms of what is a kind of rapidly disappearing margin of victory for Donald Trump, very little actual coverage of what the Trump campaign is actually doing to stop that. Basically, what's being done on the television set is, Trump's making a lot of claims about irregularities. We really don't think there are any. The president appeared this evening in a public address because of this nonsense of censorship that's going on a television set, and said, look, I won the election. I'm challenging the fraud. They're trying to steal the election. That's the simple fact. Now, why is this happening at this particular point in time? What's actually going on? What has been the beef against Donald Trump? Well, basically, the international financial system is bankrupt, and they hate the fact that this guy has come full on for what he calls the American system, that he has basically, in his campaign at least, become extremely anti-Wall Street. That's a huge threat. And they're more or less determined, and by they I don't mean Kamala Harris, the Democratic Party, and Joe Biden. I mean the people who actually run things, namely the group of British, European, and newly minted American oligarchs from Wall Street and Silicon Valley. And what they have in mind is a reshaping of the entire world economy in a green revolution format. They basically talk about it being, industrialization 4.0. And they need Trump out of the way, pure and simple, to actually implement their plan. When Adolf Hitler assumed legal responsibility for Germany, he did so under the pretext of what was then emergency conditions within the law. What had happened is that his agents had actually burned down the German parliament and laid out a major press story about that, saying it was done by communists. And basically what had to happen is a whole system of new laws and rules by decree. In the current situation we're in, the COVID pandemic emergency, which has been massively politicized and weaponized, has created or was used to create the pretext for the vote fraud, which we're now seeing in the form of mail-in and absentee ballots suddenly appearing to make up the margins of the vote which Joe Biden didn't have. The hoax here is that in-person voting wasn't, isn't, and hasn't been at all dangerous. Now, you basically, this is very straightforward. Andrew Cuomo has talked about it. He's basically called the thing he wants to come out of COVID as a re-imaging of the world and the United States as a nation, a new economy largely based on artificial intelligence and all sorts of deindustrializing policies around energy and so forth. Biden himself, actually in his senility, keeps telling you exactly what's going on. For example, he was heard to speak the other day saying, I don't need you to vote for me. I need your support after I'm elected. Just think about that. That's what he said. The whole slogan of the campaign, Build Back Better, is exactly the slogan of the World Economic Forum coming out of COVID. Build Back Better. He's flagging it. He's telling you openly. Now, the next few days in this battle are absolutely critical in terms of how people think about it. You're going to see a parade of totally fake developments by the news media and the Democrats, essentially designed to convince you that the victory of Biden over the president is inevitable. It's ongoing. You just didn't see it. And what should happen is that the president should really simply concede. What is going to happen and what they're trying to do is to provoke people to become so angry about this that they react with violence. The FBI was signaling at the time that all of these things were being set up over the course of the summer that the biggest domestic terrorist threat there is in the United States is not anybody who comes in as an al-Qaeda agent secretly or anything else. It's right-wing militias, and you might as well have added the term associated with Donald Trump. Now, again, the point that you've got to remember here is that Donald Trump won the election. And he did it in ways which these guys couldn't even perceive. He did it by mobilizing unprecedented numbers of black men and women, Hispanics, LGBT people, and white women. If you look at the exit polls, you'll find that this is true, much to the, it just blew the minds of people like Charles Blow of the New York Times and other people who've looked at this thing. These, after all, are the very people and sectors of the population who, through identity politics, are supposed to be the worst enemies of Donald Trump, the so-called misogynist, racist devil, at least as they portray him in their propaganda. Now, the Trump team is challenging the vote fraud in various forms in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada legally. Many of the challenges involve getting access to the ongoing vote counts, which again is something that should slap you in the face. If Joe Biden were being reasonable, if he actually won the election, why would his campaign be trying to bar people from watching the counting of the vote? Wouldn't he be confidently saying, let's be completely transparent, everybody gets in and you can watch it and you can see it, and therefore you can have confidence in it? No, what they're trying to do is they're actually trying to bar Trump poll watchers from coming in and watching the vote. This kind of insanity was set up through the entire summer by an institute at Georgetown, which is called the Institute for Constitutional Advocacy and Protection. I call it ICAP. Now, ICAP is run by Mary McCord. If you know the name or it rings a bell in your head, it's because that's the lady who was the deputy at the National Security Division of the United States Department of Justice, who set up General Michael Flynn along with Sally Yates, the Deputy Attorney General. She went to Georgetown immediately after she was kind of canned at the Justice Department and started working on this thing called ICAP, which has partnered throughout the summer with Facebook and Twitter and with the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith, the ADL, in a project which has flooded the battleground states' district attorneys and election officials with the lie that Donald Trump supporters were going to engage in armed interventions in the voting process on Election Day. That's what all of these people who are counting the vote and who are now setting up, paper on windows to prevent the Trump people from peering in, that's what they have been brainwashed to believe by this operation operating out of Georgetown and Mary McCord. Now, the legal challenges also involve the fact that various courts in the battleground states have actually taken extant election laws and completely rewritten them to extend deadlines which are set by law and to alter procedures for counting the vote, which are the normal procedures for counting votes. Things which have happened include the fact that in many places, the courts have decided that signatures on return ballots don't have to match the signatures of the voter when they register to vote. They're also challenging the irregularities which most everybody saw on election night, that what I call the 4-hour gap. In other words, what happened was Donald Trump was clearly headed to victory around 9, 10 o'clock in the evening. And then all of a sudden, in the key battleground states, the vote simply slowed down to a crawl. And no more reporting was coming in at all. In Michigan, during that time period, for example, 138,339 votes were turned in, all of them for Biden, none of them for Trump. That's a statistical impossibility. There's an emerging national pattern, which we're observing all over the country, of voters appearing at the polls who favored Trump and who were not allowed to vote because someone claiming their identity had already voted. The situation which we saw in that 4-hour gap had actually been consciously, totally referred to by a firm which is called Hawkfish, which was set up and is run by and funded by Michael Bloomberg. And if you followed the Bloomberg campaign at all during the time that he dropped his first $1 billion on this election and failed himself as a candidate, you would have seen that he planned, as he exited the race, to spend tons of money, millions of dollars, in the battleground states, setting up something which he called infrastructure. And that was all run through this data firm called Hawkfish. And what the firm started writing about very openly during the summer is that they said what is going to happen here is what we will call a red mirage. In other words, at the beginning of the evening, what will happen is that it will appear that Donald Trump won the election. And then as these other votes start to be counted, his lead will disappear. That's what will happen. They predicted it, they set it up, and they are running this as an actual operation. The extended plan for Joe Biden to seize the presidency was also outlined over the course of the beginning of the year and the summer in a tabletop exercise at the Transition Integrity Project, also a program at Georgetown University, chaired by a lawyer by the name of Rosa Brooks, who used to be the general counsel to George Soros's Open Society apparatus. The TIP, or the Transition Integrity Project, also includes a guy by the name of Niles Gilman. He's an Extinction Rebellion guy from the French oligarchy, and he runs a thing called the Berggruen Institute. And the rest of the people who were on this Transition Integrity Project war game included most of the never-Trumpers, the neocons, and the Democrat vote fraud operatives who've become very prominent over the last month. That's Bob Bauer and Mark Elias, formerly of the law firm Perkins Coie, which people will recognize is who represented Hillary Clinton, the Democratic National Committee, and most of the people involved in the early stages of the coup against Donald Trump. Michael Sussman, for example, also is at Perkins Coie. He's a lawyer for CrowdStrike. He actually took credit for writing key aspects of the Steele dossier, the bogus Steele dossier against the president. They were joined on the Transition Integrity Project by a real creep by the name of Norman Eisen. He is over at the Brookings Institution, and he runs a project called Protect the Vote, which actually operated to set up the entire Biden vote for protection operation throughout the country. He also was the key guy in the House impeachment proceedings against the president. He was Jerry Nadler's legal counsel on the House Judiciary Committee. So the president is fighting all over the place, but the most important front in what is actually going on is political. You have to recognize that what has been going on all this time is an extended color revolution against the President of the United States, and we've now sort of reached the penultimate point of that color revolution. Things are being censored completely, and now an election is being rigged. And a full-scale psychological warfare operation is being staged on the president's supporters to drive them crazy and to also essentially force the president to concede and leave office. which is how these things generally work. The basic war operation being run in the media is, we're not going to cover anything you're doing. We're going to tell the public that the election is over, the outcome's inevitable and irreversible, and you're crazy for fighting us. Now, in this situation, you have to ask yourself, how do color revolutions actually get defeated? Well, they get defeated when the public goes into the streets and demonstrates that they are an overwhelming force, peacefully, an overwhelming force. The president did this effectively prior to the election, when his rallies were occurring all over the country. People were coming out in droves. They were breaking the media blackout of the campaign, which was essentially only covered on Fox. It's no longer being covered that effectively at all on Fox even. In fact, they're a key part of this operation right now. And so, basically, there has to be a public presence in the streets. And one thing that I would suggest is if you could start to have building demonstrations like the motorcades and the boat parades and all of these things, and they grew day by day, it would be a wonderful thing to see as a demonstration of force at this point as to what's at stake. I think also that the second thing which people should be doing is they should be calling their senators and congressmen and insisting that the spy operation and this overt insurrection against the President of the United States has to be investigated and prosecuted, and they should be telling their congressmen and senators that if this isn't done right now, it's going to be remembered and they're going to become unelected in 2022. Like the public demonstrations and like the vote for the president, these calls should be going in massive numbers so that the overall aura which comes back at these guys who are running this thing is sort of like the line from the famous Shelley poem, The Mask of Anarchy, "We are many and you are few." Now, the first step in any successful coup d'etat, and Kirk can tell you about this, is you seize the media totally in a country, and you thereby deny any information other than the narratives you're pushing to drive popular behavior to the population. This has occurred here now. It most emphatically should have hit people in the face when the stories, the actual true stories about Joe Biden's corruption, were completely censored from public view, ahead of the election. Now, if you look at the vote operation, it's very, very similar. All of the mainstream media, including Fox, colluded on a vote suppression operation and potential vote fraud operations centered on using rigged and faked polls. The aim was to suppress the Trump vote by convincing the president's supporters that voting was meaningless because Biden was so far ahead. The president, in his remarks this evening, made specific reference to this. The aim was also, I say, to use the polls and equally fake exit polls to justify in the public mind massive vote fraud if the president began to win the election. When these bizarre late-night changes occurred, what I'm calling the 4-hour gap, and the vote suddenly turned around when you woke up in the morning in Biden's favor, a lot of people didn't say, "Oh my God, what just happened here?" Because the thing that sprang to their mind was a speculation sort of like, "Oh, well, this must mean that the polls were right and, Biden's vote is catching up. There's nothing unusual here." That was part of the purpose of these fake polls from the get-go. Now, over the past 2 to 3 weeks, there has been a national pattern where the normal social media of people who support the president has been completely shut down and deplatformed by Facebook and Twitter. Again, seizing the media, not allowing the president to have any type of voice or communication with the population. So to defeat this, it means that people are going to have to get really inventive about getting the message out. And that means that the whole vast universe of blogs, Facebook pages, networks, websites, and podcasts out there, those that support the president, have to be activated, and they have to be getting briefings from the president as to the state of the race and what's happening and what he is actually doing to defeat this fraud. They have to be given marching orders as to what can be done. They have demonstrated already that they're quite inventive and quite self-sustaining as a movement. They just need to get better coordinated for the situation we face now. Now, the other main instrument in a color revolution generally consists of demonstrations in the street on behalf of the revolutionary goal. In the article I posted today on LaRouchePAC, I posted and made reference to a video which appeared over the last 24, 48 hours by a woman by the name of Millennial Millie, who runs a website and does all sorts of public exposures. What she has done here, or what the people associated with this website have done here, is really a huge public service. Because what she's published apparently involves an infiltration of the movement called Shut Down DC, which people may know is the key group which is coordinating for essential riots should the vote turn in the president's favor. And what they've done here is to post the actual podcasts and training for these riots involving Shut Down DC, Black Lives Matter, the Sunrise Movement, and various Washington, D.C. and federal officials conspiring with them to actually stage these riots. In these Zoom calls, they brag about being an official part of the Democratic Party. You'll get a really good idea of how Color Revolution's synthetic riots are coordinated by watching this video, which the people who did whatever they did here to get inside these podcasts, I think it was an infiltration, have now given to the Department of Justice and to federal authorities. It was very interesting to me to find on this video a woman by the name of Maria Stephan from something called the Institute for Peace, which most people know is Project Democracy, the official way which we run coups in foreign countries. Maria Stephan is a veteran of the CIA's Color Revolutions internationally, and she played a major role in the coup in Ukraine, which of course actually was run in part by Joe Biden. So we have to shine a light on these people, on these institutions. Some of the things that I've just told you now have been making their way into the mainstream press. For example, Tucker Carlson was talking about a part of this whole apparatus, Hawkfish, the whole scenario around the Red Mirage, the Transition Integrity Project, and the Georgetown wonderful project with our Mary McCourt from the Trump coup going right there. But we have to basically think about this as a color revolution, ongoing, reaching its penultimate stage, a president who's fighting it, and what's really critical here is the ability of his forces and our forces to politically organize the public mind in terms of resisting this thing. So that's what I'll leave my statement with tonight.
Okay, very good. Now, let me just check something. I know, Kirk, you're there. Do we also have Bill Binney on the line with us?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, very good. Bill, I just want to make sure you were there. Okay, so Kirk, we're going to go to you first. Let's see if you've got what you've got to say to us. And for people who don't know, Kirk Wiebe is a former senior analyst with National Security Agency. Go ahead, Kirk.
Yeah, let me first recognize with some kudos to Barb for the excellent rundown she just provided. She touched on a number of strategies being used by the other side. I guess that's the politest way I can put it right now. If you understand the seriousness of the nature of what the other side is doing, none of it's happenstance. As Barbara's told you, this is all planned, orchestrated, and was planned a long time ago. And I would also tell you there are some new aspects to it because they're hidden from the open source information that most of us are privy to. But there are some parts that have been well known, but not used in the public domain. And let me refer to something called PSY, P-S-Y, standing for psychological, and OP standing for operations. Some people say PSYOPs, P-S-Y-O-P-S. PSYOPs, I'm going to read to you the military Department of Defense definition. It's not long. But where I use the word foreign audience, I want you to substitute the word Republican or conservative. Use the one you'd like. Here's what it says. Psychological operations, or PSYOP, are intended to convey selected information and indicators to foreign audiences, again, conservative audiences, to influence their emotions, motives, objective reasoning, and ultimately the behavior of foreign governments, read Trump administration, organizations, groups, and individuals. The purpose of psychological operations is to induce or reinforce attitudes and behavior favorable to the originator's objectives. That is precisely what we've been seeing going on in the media. Some people call it propaganda, but this is directly extrapolated from the Department of Defense definition. Now, a component of PSYOPs is information operations, and that is the media. So just to put all of that into context so that people can get a sense of just how diabolical and purposeful all of this, all of it during Trump's last 4 years, all of this has been purposeful. Now, another point, I just mentioned that some of the efforts being used by the other side are clandestine or hidden from public view. One very important effort that people are working right now to bring to the attention of the Trump administration is an information technology capability that operates via the internet called the Hammer, and an application that works with the Hammer called Scorecard. Hammer does a lot of things, including crawling up computers and downloading files without a user ever knowing it. But the part that I want to emphasize to you tonight is Scorecard, because it was designed with the express purpose of changing vote totals on the fly, meaning not preloaded anywhere in a computer, but actually targeting the reporting of precinct data upward to the state level over the internet. There's no air gap at this point. This is the way data is transmitted. We all use the internet. When the packets are recognized, and the packets are little bits of information that make up a report of voting between two candidates or a group of candidates. It can be defined as small, large, whatever. But the packets that make up that transmission over the internet can be opened, looked at, recognized for who they're going to and what they contain. And the data inside each packet can be switched. It can be changed in microseconds, zipped back up, so to speak. Imagine putting a jacket on, zipping them up, and sending it on its way, so that the receiver never really perceives a delay. There's always a little delay. Somebody sends you an email. It takes a few seconds before it gets to your computer. So nobody's the wiser. But the data has been changed. And the scorecard works based on an algorithm that needs a 3% or less disparity or difference between two candidates. So that if it's 20-point difference or 10-point difference, it's not going to function. Why? The designer of this did not want to be obvious. And if you go around instantaneously changing totals from 10% to nothing, or even losing, people are going to notice that and say, what the heck's going on? But if I open that window to just a little bit, a 3% difference, then a change that comes in is more acceptable to observers and less suspect, if you will. This is the way the scorecard works. The scorecard is working right now in Georgia, in Nevada, in a number of these states. And it's not the only tool that's being used. Another one is fake logon authorities have been implemented in the counting control systems, which are Windows computers, where the votes are counted, so that a remote user having the right password can log on and change data that way as well. So what I'm trying to say is, yeah, ballots are being dumped off at the post office and backmarked to 3 November, even though they arrived on 4 November. A lot of that ballot manipulation is going on, but this is the less visible aspect that I want people to be aware of. Extremely powerful, and it needs to be stopped. The good news is it records data, and if we can bust this open with the help of the administration and the tools of some agencies, we will find the evidence that votes were changed. So it's another great boon to the team of lawyers if we can get this available. All right. And finally, I'd like to read to you some wisdom that I came across today, earlier, by Dick Morris, who happened to show up on Newsmax. And I ran across a article. By the way, for those of you who do not know, Dick Morris is a former advisor for former President Bill Clinton. And he's been appearing on Newsmax on our side, so to speak. And he reminds us of this important constitutional fact. The people who are in charge of elections are not governors. They're not even secretaries of state. Secretaries of state just carry out, or they're supposed to, election law in a state. The actual laws are defined and laid out and implemented by the legislature of each state. I'm going to read you now what he suggests, an action point, and I just think it's very clever, and it is very important that you hear it. Here it is, quote, "We have to move the fight from the executive branch of the states to the legislative branch of the states. In all of these 4 key battleground states," and he lists North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, there are Democratic governors interfering in the process but both houses of the legislature in those states are Republican.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys need to wake up, Morris said. And if you live in those states, you need to call your state representative and your state senator, not federal, state, and say, get on the ball, get your butts in gear, get to the state capitol, demand that the legislature be called into session and take over the counting process in your state for which you are ultimately responsible. That's my 2 cents, Dennis.
Okay, thanks a lot, Kirk. All right, so now we go to Mr. Binney, who is the infamous gray eminence of intelligence, the master of the world, the designer of the thin thread system, and an all-around raconteur. So, are you there, Bill?
Yes, I am, Dennis. Thanks for the introduction. Well, I mean, I'm just a simple country boy, really. I come from the central western part of Pennsylvania, and to me, it's really pretty simple. These people are obviously violating law in various places. They should be arrested now. They should issue warrants for them and arrest them. This is the only way to stop this stuff. I mean, look at the arrogance of the extreme left and the intelligence community and the bureaucrats that we have in D.C. They think they can do anything. They can lie to Congress. They can lie to us. They can lie to anybody they want. They can manipulate it. They can change the votes. They can do anything, you know. We can shut people out. We don't allow validation of the election. We don't allow validation of the votes. We don't allow any of that. We're going to control everything. You just sit back there, be happy, and do what we tell you. This is total, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, Barr and Durham should have acted long before this. If they did, we wouldn't have this problem because most of the people involved in it would be arrested. And when you do that kind of thing, what it says to all the others who would be participating and are currently participating, you if you do this, you're going to be held accountable by the law and you're going to go to jail. But so far, you know, Comey, Mueller, all of them, they've all skated on the basic idea that whoever comes in next won't want to hold us accountable because if they do, then they're liable to be held accountable after they leave office. You see, that's that perpetual thing of we protect you, you protect us, and so on. So we always kick the can down the road, and it never gets addressed. So the point is you need to address these crimes that are being committed. I mean, if these people were whistleblowers, they'd be in jail in a heartbeat. You know, that's what has happened to any whistleblower who comes up and says anything that the administration doesn't like, they throw them in jail. They tried to do it with Kirk and I. They fabricated evidence. The only reason we're not in jail is because, you know, I caught them at it, and I threatened them with malicious prosecution. That's the only reason they left. And I gave them the evidence, so I had them dead to rights. So they knew they were dead, okay? So, but most people, you know, aren't you know, aware that the government does this kind of thing. They trust them, and you can't. These people are criminals, and that's why. And they're going to continue to be criminals as long as we don't arrest them and indict them, let them tell a judge, and then put them in jail.
Okay, the succinct Mr. Mr. Binney has spoken. We are going to go to Q&A.
Q&A session has started. To ask your question, please press *6.
There is already a question for you, Kirk. Actually, there are different people have formulated it in different ways. So I'm going to ask that in just a minute. Before I do that, let me simply say to everybody, because a lot of people got on, good that people have joined us, we want you to be active with us. There are 3 ways you can do that. 1, you can contribute to the LaRouche Political Action Committee. You can hear the kind of mobilization that's required, and you hear the kind of material that we are working on. Let me point out that one of the things we are going to be doing, and we have to do over the next days, to be in a position to evaluate and reevaluate. That means that we'll be coming up with things perhaps during the day that we may change by that evening based on the intelligence and the changes in the circumstances. And therefore, we need the financial resources to do that kind of thing, as well, of course, manpower resources. If you can offer time in other ways, that's also very important. Get in touch with local and regional organizers to do that. We'll come back to more of that. A few things have been said about also what you can do There will be a Saturday meeting. You can see that on Saturday at 2 o'clock. I will also point out that I earlier said something about if you have in some fashion any evidence of vote fraud, because there are some people that have that, especially if you got anything material like, extra ballots that you were sent or ballots to dead people and so on, make a small video, send it to us, and we can give you some ways to do that. We'll collect these and so forth, because the important, relevant thing is this is ongoing. And third, most importantly, reading and getting your own mind free to actually deliberate with others who are beginning to come out of a fog and also want to actually continue to fight, because a lot of that's going on out there. So we have our alert service. We have our daily briefings, which you'll see with Harley Schlanger. And, of course, there's Executive Intelligence Review, to which you can subscribe. More on that later. So I just want to ask this question on behalf of two different people who asked it, and here's what it was. This is to you, Kirk, which is, how does Trump prove in court that, number one, scorecard exists, and number two, is manipulating this election? And then the other person put it, how do you know that it's currently being used? So that was the questions I thought I would direct it at you first.
Sure. Well, the reason I know is because I have communication with the guy that invented it for the government. It was invented in the early 2000s to be used in the war against terrorism. But it was a copy, at least, was taken out of authorized usage, moved to a clandestine location, and used for political purposes, namely the gathering of information that could be used to help people who wanted to blackmail other people. We know that the Trump family was surveilled by this illegal surveillance mechanism. We know that many members of Congress, the Supreme Court, members of churches, synagogues, various religious organizations all over the country, over 400 law firms, over 5 million businesses worldwide. It's just extensive, and the list goes on and on. So the other question is, how do we get it such that the data or the evidence of what it is doing can be presented in court? And therein lies the challenge. We're trying to inform the administration about the existence of this capability. And in order to position it so that it can be used, we need to get the inventor, who at one time did work for Department of Defense, the intelligence community, get his clearances reinstated and brought back into government quickly. This can be done in one day. This is not a long process. The president could order it and make it happen very, very quickly. And he'll need a team of technical people to help him put together the right information in a form that a lawyer can understand and present in court. And then there's the data from the device, the storage of its operational history, a log, if you will, a log of its activities would be part of that evidence. And it would show without a measure of doubt. And it would be proof that numbers were changed and where they were changed, in what state, what precinct, all of that. So this is a work in progress and something we're trying to do. And wish us success in getting it done.
Okay, very good. I'm going to go on unless there's either you or Bill want to add anything, Barbara?
No, I'm intrigued, and I think that as much as we can get out and put this up on the site quickly, it will facilitate it actually getting out and quickly to the president and back this thing up.
And later on, for everybody who will be listening, you will hear Mr. Kirk Wiebe do a commercial for Executive Intelligence Review exactly for that purpose. In other words, if you don't get between LaRouchePAC, financing LaRouchePAC, and so on, I mean, you can't get what you just heard anywhere else. Help us get this out. All right, let me go right now to the phones. Okay, are you able to hear us?
Yeah, good evening. 1 second. Hello, this is Jim from Michigan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, Jim.
Yes.
Hi. Listen, I've got a question for Kirk on this scorecard. During the, I guess Wisconsin is one of the states that's supposed to have a recount. Could that scorecard be used on that, and would it be noticeable right up front? And to Bill, when I met you at our conference February of last year, I brought up a question to you about, I think the guy's name is Robert David Steele, who had proposed that the president should have a TV channel or something like that, which he could actually be directly talking to the population. I don't know if you're still in touch with that person, but I also don't know if the president does have a website. And the last thing I want to say is, I hope that this dialogue, at least the remarks you folks have put out, will be put out on the website so I can keep forwarding it, because I have been in touch with the state reps and the state senator as well as the federal, and there's still a lot of blowback on that. So let me know what you think.
Well, I mean, as far as a public channel for the president to get his comments out, I don't think he's got one. He's totally dependent on mainstream media, except for Twitter, which, of course, shuts him down from time to time. So it's a question now of whether or not he actually will ever have any real unencumbered media to pass information out that he has or his opinions or views. I mean, that's the kind of thing that people need to know to decide who they're going to vote for God's sake. I mean, and what they're doing is keeping that kind of information away from the public, and that's keeping an uninformed electorate. And that seems to be the objective here. We want you to know only what we want you to know, and just pay attention to the advertisement we're putting out there. Don't look behind the curtain to see the guy and see what he's doing and manipulating. So I just think the whole thing's a fraud, and this needs to be handled with the courts and the judges and the testimony in open court and under the laws. I mean, we're not obeying our laws anymore. At least that's why I keep calling the Department of Justice, DOJ, I call it the Department of Just Us, and we the people are not included. And until Durham and Barr start doing something that's clear and effective and dealing with the crimes that these people are committing, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, how can they have such a low rating simply because public rating because of the crimes they're committing and the arrogance that they do it with. They just figure they're untouchable. So, and if nothing happens, guess what? They are. So if we don't do the right thing, I mean, we're going to end up with what we voted for or what they manipulated the vote to become. And if we don't do something about it to stop this, to clean up the mess, it's going to get worse.
Okay, Kirk?
Yes, on the issue of could it be used during the recount process? And I can think of no reason that would stop it, because a recount is going to be just that. It's a simple recount, and totals, again, are going to be sent up somewhere. And as they travel over the Internet, the scorecard can pick them off, change them, let them go on their merry way. So, yeah, it's a concern. It's a worry. And we've got to disable it, stop it.
Let me raise just one issue where I think it becomes really kind of interesting. There's this sort of screenshot from the Secretary of State of Wisconsin during that critical 4-hour period, reflecting, precincts or wards in the black areas of Milwaukee, about 14 or 15 wards, in which the screenshot, which was taken by people of what was on the Secretary of State's website, showed that in those wards you had many, many, many more votes than you had registered voters, sometimes by a quantity of over 200 to 400% more votes than voters. In other words, registered voters in this ward is 200 people. You had 400 votes. That obviously is extremely problematical and probably was an open admission of what was going on in terms of stuffing the ballot box. There was a great deal of outrage. People noticed it. They called up the Secretary of State. They said, what the hell is going on here? And by the morning, in fact, the numbers were altered to bring the vote in line with the registered voters. The figures were completely changed. Do you think that scorecard could have been used in that particular instance to actually make everything sort of add up?
It doesn't sound right to me, Barb. It's someone would have to show me that would be feasible, but
right.
Because the system is not programmed to work in that way,
okay.
Which is kind of a reversal rather than an add. It's kind of a subtraction.
Yeah. I got you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, very good. And you can't get this conversation anyplace else, everybody. You should contribute to LaRouchePAC and also get our publications, particularly the alert service. I think it's pretty clear. The other element, of course, is to get it out to people so you have something to disseminate. I've been getting calls, I think probably many of us have been, for the much of yesterday and today. Different people want to help us by getting things out and deploying. Well, this is what you're going to need. This is the ammunition that we're giving you. Okay, so can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Good evening, everyone. This is Alvin here in New York. I guess primarily Barbara, but Kurt and Bill can please feel free to jump in. First, thank you for this intelligence report that will be constantly updated and the evidence that you're providing. I've had the good fortune, willfully, of not watching or reading a single word or clip on this so-called election. So what's coming in, I've seen drips and drabs of things, but what you're doing here and laying out is something to keep people from freaking out, because we can actually show them, A, what's actually going on, and B, the method and the way in which we're going to, or they can, join us in combating this. But on the subject, or in the area terms of how to defeat a color revolution, when you talk about taking it to the streets, in essence, a public presence in the streets, nonviolent, it sounds good, it sounds important and necessary, but we've got this COVID situation, and winter is coming. So I wonder to what extent that, not that you can't get people out in the streets, I imagine, but what effect that could be. That raises some questions in my mind, as well as the idea of calling representatives to demand investigations and that they do their job. Otherwise, next election, something that's too far down the road. I'm happy that Bill, you, and Kurt are on because of all the work done around the declassification, or rather demanding that, around Russiagate, around Flynn, around Stone. And if that, can you talk about that, if that is a viable way for us to think and organize around to break that, since Barr and company have obviously, at least so far, there's no reason to believe they're going to show up to do anything of any good during this period.
Well, I'll answer first on the COVID thing. All right. Basically, what people were doing, involved not, some kind of mass public demonstrations, but rather, vehicle demonstrations, cars, not the silly Biden stuff where he's talking to a bunch of cars in a parking lot and people are honking about what he's saying, but actual, if you looked at the videos of what was going on with these, 30, 50-mile car caravans, by demonstrators for Trump ahead of the election. We posted a video about that on LaRouchePAC.com. It's amazing it involved 50,000, 60,000, 70,000 people, but in cars, all right? So when we're talking about, a million car march, we're not talking about a million man march in the form of people, crowding up against one another in a demonstration. We're talking about, a million car march. Think what that would do as a demonstration publicly that could not be ignored throughout the country and saying, we're not going to tolerate this. With respect to calling and putting the heat on Congress and the Senate, if you see what's going on now, at least, in my perception of it, what you have is you have a vote which shows you, again, how fraudulent this whole thing was, where Trump managed to carry several senators across the finish line. What the Democrats were attempting to do here was to create a total one-party system. Their idea was, we're going to take the Senate, we have the House, and we're going to take the presidency, and then we're going to begin to implement our plan here, which essentially was a plan to destroy the United States Constitution. We're going to eliminate the Electoral College. We're going to eliminate the filibuster. We're going to give statehood to Puerto Rico and D.C., not for the merits of that proposition, but to increase the Democratic number of senators, changing that. We're going to basically term limit the Supreme Court and change the number of justices, and we're going to pack the court so that the entire constitutional separation of powers would have been completely altered. Now, Trump basically pulled these senators across the finish line. In addition, the Democrats picked up several House seats. The Republicans did in places which they weren't supposed to. That has significantly altered some of the things in the House. The problem that you have is, if you look at what's happening now, none of these people are out there raising hell about what's going on in the color revolution in this country. They need to be kicked in the ass. They need to be told by the population, this is unacceptable. You can't function in the swamp. We're not doing that anymore, in case you didn't notice. And, by having the two things together, massive public demonstrations and a massive mobilization from the demonstrations into the Congress, and essentially saying, just like Dick Morris said about the legislature here, there's lots of things the Congress could be doing at this point that if the executive isn't going to do it. So the point is to really put it to these guys, no, this is we're changing all of this now. What you think you're going to do in terms of Washington, D.C., that's no good anymore. We're having a color revolution here. What has happened in this country for the last 4 years is unacceptable. Only a few people in the House Intelligence Committee actually did their work in terms of going after this coup. But even right now, you don't see, what you see out there fighting and going to these various states is, in Arizona, you got Rick Grinnell, and you got Rudy in Philadelphia, along with Eric Trump. You don't see the Congress out there saying, oh, wait a second, this is absurd. We're going through a color revolution. I'm not supporting that. We're going to act to actually, tear this thing apart. It's unacceptable. We'll figure out how to go after the Brookings Institution and to go after, Georgetown and the people who are fomenting this thing. Why in the hell are we still funding the Institute for Peace? We should cut off its funding. Arrest them also, as Bill says, but cut off their funding also. Why the hell is Congress even funding this? Why don't we just shut down Project Democracy right now? That Congress can do. But the key thing I want to say about all of this stuff is that, we keep trying to say, well, Donald Trump should do this or Donald Trump should do that, or, what have you. What Lyndon LaRouche always emphasized was that leaders can become bad leaders in the situation of our government because the population doesn't act upon them. You allow them to get away with stuff. And the way that you actually have to think about organizing is not making a whole series of proposals for Donald Trump, if he loses, to go ahead and declassify documents. At that point, you're in a pretty dicey situation. What should happen at this point in time is the citizens throughout the country should just simply say, no, this is not happening. We're not going to let our country be seized by this, and we're going to back the president in his fight to do this. But it's the citizens' responsibility. And that's what I would emphasize, Alvin, because I think yes, declassification, he's done that 3 times already. And the deep state has told him to go screw himself, essentially. They've dragged their feet, they've done other things. What's he going to do? He's going to fire them. Probably he's going to fire a bunch of people. He's talked about firing Chris Wray. He's talked about firing Gina Haspel. But the key point here is that the citizens have to up the ante. They have to say, no, as Bill said, not good enough to just fire them. They have to be arrested. And for that, you need a consensus within the government itself. And the way you create that consensus is by citizens getting out there and saying, I'm not putting up with this bullshit anymore. It's over. We're changing things. We want the Constitution back. We want the people who did this coup prosecuted. We are not going to stand for it. We're a pitchfork brigade, in essence. Nonviolent, but in huge numbers.
That's right. We want to give the Congress an uplifting experience. Kick them in the ass. Okay, we got to do this right. And let me just say to everybody, we've got states, we've got Texas, Pennsylvania, California, Mississippi, Missouri, Oregon, and New York on the phone. So we're going to be going for and so they right know we've got about and please tell people to get on the phone, get them on now, or get them on the YouTube. We're at about we have a lot of people on the line right now, so we're going to go to I think we'll try California here. Okay, are you able to hear us? Okay.
Right here. Hey.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Kelly Z. Mordecai. I'm with Watch the Vote USA. We're a national election integrity, election transparency organization. I'm a board member. We are about to launch a survey, how was your voting experience? And it will note problems because people comment. For example, we did this in 2016 in California. And in the comments, people were frustrated because they showed up with their sample ballot, and they were told they weren't registered. And then they asked, well, why do I have a sample ballot? They go to the precinct, and they were flipped to vote by mail. And or people that were vote by mail didn't get their ballots. So the gentleman that was talking about this software that unzips a file when a election clerk sends to the state, the Secretary of State, and it quickly changes things by 3%. I can believe this. There are other problems that this survey will note, but I'm already hearing all sorts of problems. A friend went to as soon as the polls opened, he went there, and he was unregistered. This happened as in Tuesday. So there are all sorts of problems, and this survey is going to help immensely. And I'm hoping that when we get it done, I'm working on it right now, but when we get this survey done, I was hoping the LaRouchePAC can go ahead and launch it to their people as well. I'm hearing other stories, other states. Another group called Election Justice did this in 2016, same problem. And people were getting flipped to different political parties. That can affect the primary election. Our election system is not secure. Now, it's a challenge to prove voter fraud, and I'd rather say election fraud. Voter fraud is when somebody votes in 2 different states or 2 different counties. Election fraud is on mass scale. Like somebody who brings a Santa Claus bag with 100,000 ballots, they get counted, and they all happen to be named Biden on the ballots. So we are doing things, and when we reveal the problems, then we can go to prosecutors, Department of Justice. We can go to even grand juries. I've been before a grand jury at my request over this. We can go to the legislatures to change things. it's hard to prove fraud, but it's easy to prove vulnerabilities. And I'm getting a lot of mileage and more ears are opening when I'm showing vulnerabilities. So, for example...
hold on, let me just say to you, we have a lot of people in the queue. This is good. I'm very glad you're giving us this full report. But if you can just if there's either a comment, we can just kind of draw it up because we don't have a lot of time. And we can get back to, we can get back to you about it. But is there anything you either want to address, I guess, to these people or...
There's a lot of vulnerabilities. I would encourage people to go to Facebook and join up on Watch the Vote USA because we're hoping people can share the survey when we launch it. We've got to expose the vulnerabilities, prove through testimony and comments that there are all sorts of problems. So I do want to get in touch with some higher-ups, and you obviously have my number. Gerald also has contacts. So I guess I would ask someone to contact me after the show.
Sure. Very good.
Sure.
Very good. No problem. And thanks a lot. And again, it's just because there's a lot of people in the queue. They all have questions. But this is very important. And I'll just say one thing, which is we do want, as we said before, because the more people are getting on, and they should know this, we do want people to get to us if they've got actual evidence of fraud. Again, a short 3-minute video is great because then we have it. So thank you very much for your call. All right, are you able to hear us? You may want to unmute your phone. I think you're still muted. Try again. Okay, you're for some reason you're still muted. You might want to just try to call back. You'll be able to get back into the queue. So we'll go to the next person. All right, are you able to hear us?
Hello.
Yes.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, just give your first name and where you're calling from.
Hi, Brian. I'm calling from Alabama. We spoke very recently, as a matter of fact, several of us. I have some very direct questions. This would be to Kirk and to Bill and all of you. How much of this activity, of the voter fraud activity, if any, can we tie to foreign intelligence agencies? And if so, which countries would those be, and how much can be tied to Eric Schmidt and his work with North Korea, for example, and any ties to MIT or Cambridge or DARPA in the development of these programs that were spoken of earlier in this call?
Okay, anybody want to take that?
Well, I would personally say that I think all the evidence is resident in the NSA databases of collecting everything in the world. So anybody in any relationship would be shown there, and any kind of interaction or exchange of software electronically would be captured, and any coordination would also be captured. So it's a matter of having the will and the interest in looking at that database to find out and answer those questions you just asked.
All right, let's assume that will was there and it was done. What kind of effects would you imagine would come from that?
You mean them interfering with it in terms of electronic hacking or things of that nature? Or?
Proof of them interfering.
Oh, well, that shouldn't be difficult at all. I mean, that should be pretty straightforward. Again, the evidence of them arranging, coordinating, planning would all be there in that database.
Exactly. All right, because there are, let's just say that's, from what I understand, already being looked at. And I think we'll see in time, in the shortness of time, with what is going on presently. We should see.
Here's what I'm going to have to do. Excuse me. I'm going to have to limit you and everybody else that's hearing me, because a lot of people are in the queue. So I'm going to ask people that if you have one question, or if you can have a two-part question, that's fine. But we're going to have to get moving. So if you need more, we can get back to you. Okay, thanks a lot, because it would just help us continue this. Thank you. All right, are you able to hear us? Hello?
Yes. This is Karen from Columbus.
Uh-huh.
I want to know why it's so difficult to get a hold of the Trump organization, because I would think that if you're going to the people who have his ear, there certainly are a lot of them. People like Pam Bondi right now and Corey Lewandowski. Sidney Powell certainly has his ear. Why is it so difficult?
Well, I'll take a crack at that one. This is Kirk, because I've lived it for a year and a half. We have been trying to get the attention of the administration for a year and a half. I am not personally, or wasn't until recently, in a communications path that would get me close to the White House inner circle. I have spoken to Sidney Powell a couple of times. We have her attention. But who she has to go to, I don't know. And I don't know if there's yet another inner circle that she has to break through. So it's kind of like the Temple Mount. How do you enter the gate? How many guards are there? It's and I've noticed this even in my career at NSA. I would tell you that the higher you go up any organization, there are guards built in to prevent you from getting there, and then you have secret agendas and personal agendas, because people in the midway might be afraid of something you might say to the big guy, and pretty soon you have people even filtering what the big guy hears because they don't want him to get too excited. So you get humans interfering with communications at so many levels. It is just difficult. And I don't have a simple answer for that. I had thought at one point something like a suggestion program where somebody fills something out, put it in a suggestion box, and somebody working for the president would go through that periodically. But you can imagine on a national scale, they'd probably have 400,000 items in there at any given time. So I don't have an answer, Karen. It's a very frustrating thing.
You know, instead of going through all those channels, the Trump kids are accessible. They're out with the public all the time, and they're listening to us.
Well, here's what I would say. I mean, I just want to actually say something about this, because those of us that organize all the time often run into this. First of all, we have met the Trump kids in front of Trump Tower on various occasions. Second of all, we have passed things to people, including some of his kids, in that way. Third, we talked to several people who were even, So what, just to say, however, I will say, having talked to certain people who are have been in touch with Donald Trump, that what you're dealing with here is it's what we do. I learned something once watching something that Donald Trump was doing. This happened to be with Candace Owens and various of these people. He was doing something with the black students one day, about a year and a half ago. And here's what he did. He said, well, she had this show, and I was watching it, and nobody was watching it. Now we got to wait for this person. I said, I often do this. I go on the internet, and I watch, and I see somebody saying something really interesting, and I say, well, who's really, who they got around? I said, well, they got, 5 people following them? Well, we got to wait for this person. He said, now, that doesn't mean what they're saying has not gotten my attention. But the question is, what are they doing? So I'm going to say this to everybody, and it's all not just friendly. It's obvious that we're all here for the same purpose. Help us get out what we are telling you here, and I have great confidence that this will be heard. And I'll just say that much. we're going to just keep moving. Thank you for the question.
Sure.
And please be active with us because we can make this breakthrough. Thank you. Okay, are you able to hear us? Hello?
Can I be heard?
Now you can be heard. Yeah, give us your first name and where you're calling from.
Yeah, this is Harrison from Missouri, and
Okay.
this question is for Kirk Wiebe. How do we overcome the PSYOP, and how do we boost the morale of people, particularly conservatives, right wingers, pro-Trump people, Republicans? How can we improve their morale of those who've been affected by it? And what are some? I've noticed that this is a lot of this going on in social media, especially Facebook and Twitter. What are some identifying signs? And that's my question.
Yeah, Harrison, thank you for the question. To me, it surrounds the word truth. Morale, I think, comes from people who are being told the truth. It derives from that because people then have a sense of confidence and well-being. People can't deal with intangibles and obscure things and things that aren't quite right because you never can explain what the motive is. So Bill and I and a couple of other people have talked about the need for a truth outlet. It would be a kind of a news organization that would filter, measure the quality of organizations putting out information, and then filter, kind of like what Facebook is doing, but we would do it with a public algorithm, which would expose how we're doing it. But as long as we stay ahead of the bad guys, information is got to be in the public sphere. So I think LaRouche is trying to be just such an organization, and is why they're holding these events such as tonight. There's so much bad information out there and so many hidden agendas, as you know, Harrison. Morale, I really believe, is a result of getting the truth, and then also connecting to organizations or people which form organizations who value the truth as you do. And then you can build camaraderie, trust. You can have conversations that feature 99.9% the truth, and that helps build morale. We need to come together. We're too fragmented, and LaRouche is helping to get that done, I think.
Barbara, you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, what you're saying is really critical, and I think the way that the whole PSYOP, as Kurt would say, a big part of it is convincing individuals that they're out there by themselves, that they're just one person, okay? And what can you do against this whole apparatus if you're just one person? Which is why these rallies, which were held pre-election, were so terrifically effective, in addition to the president himself holding the rallies which he held, had such an impact because it shows people dramatically, there are all these people who I can talk to who think a lot like me, and, I'm not one person. I'm not out here to be crushed, and this is really powerful. So I think, I really underscore what Kirk is saying. You need to, do away with a lot of the nonsense which hits you on the internet. I told you just today that if I turn on Fox, which is, or even OAN at this point, around this particular battle, what you're seeing is, well, the president hasn't presented any evidence yet. And yet, the evidence is clearly out there. They're gathering the evidence. All right. So the point is that you have to think about exactly the events which moralized people coming into the election, drove the vote out. Okay, and that's what has to be come again. That's something that's already demonstrated it can work. And then you have to add the component that you have to really have the connection with people to say, I'm not going to feed you anything that I can't verify or is fake, or a lot of the things which come through things like QAnon, for example. One has to really question: is this a psyop? Is it designed to actually just take people off into this universe where they're hooked to their computers, they're not actually acting on the world, and they're playing kind of this magic game that someone is telling them how the world works? And it's really a passive activity. I think you could, for example, take that and say, well, that was a targeted operation, I think provably so, which actually drove down the vote in the 2018 election because Q was going to take care of it all.
Yeah.
All right, so
that's the plan, so they say.
Pardon me?
Yeah, their whole mantra of quote unquote trust the plan.
Right. Which basically said I don't have to act as an individual on the world and change it. All right, but the role of the citizen under our Constitution is exactly that. You have a moral obligation to act upon the world and change it for the better. That the whole system and the whole republic depends on the individual citizen acting as a citizen. So the game that they're playing is to make you not believe that you're a citizen who can act. That's the whole game. And we have to reverse that.
You're a subject to fate, basically.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Okay, thanks for the question. We're going to go to the next person. Thank you very much. Okay, can you hear us?
Hello.
Yes. Can you speak up a little bit? A little louder.
Hi, this is Jonathan from Houston, Texas.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to say I've got friends and family of mine. I've gotten into arguments with them a good number of times. They believe in talking heads like Rachel Maddow. They believe in the New York Times, and they believe in the in MSNBC, and anything outside of that is a conspiracy theory. So anyway, I see Biden supporters online saying that the explanation for why there was a delay from the time in between Trump when he was winning those states, he was cruising to victory, and then all of a sudden, I've never seen this before. I've watched elections before, but I've never seen all of a sudden all the states, all the voting just stops, and then maybe hours later it goes back online, and there's a surge of it just shoots up for Biden. So I hear Biden supporters saying the explanation for that is that it takes time for the mail-in ballots to be counted. So that explains the couple of hours that nothing happened. So is that a reasonable explanation, or?
No.
I'll just quickly point out that there were mail-in ballots in Florida, and that didn't happen in Florida.
Oh, okay. There was no. So you're saying there was no mail-in ballots in Florida?
No, there were mail-in ballots in Florida.
Yeah, there were.
Oh.
Okay, that's the first point. The second point is if you actually think about the assumption and what that explanation is, they're assuming that every single place in the election counting ballots with different levels of voting in various states essentially started counting the mail-in ballots at exactly the same time. That's a pretty broad assumption. It didn't happen, in other words.
And if they did, what does that mean?
Okay.
Yeah, right here. See, part of it, hold on. But this is like, you got to, some of this you want to just relax. It's not just you. Everybody does this, right? This is what we call getting bamboozled. It's like they tell you you can't vote in person, but you can shop. So you go to the supermarket, right? You got to go to that every week, right? But you can't go to the polling place to cast your ballot because you're going to get COVID.
Well, I've got my father. He loves reading the New York Times, and he believes that it just takes time for all these mail-in ballots to come in, and it takes time, and a good amount of people that send the mail-in ballots, they're smarter than the Trump voters, and they want to avoid voting in person because it's very deadly, and that a lot of them are just going to be for Biden, and you guys are just sore losers for not accepting a legitimate election.
Well, that's someone who's drunk the Kool-Aid, clearly.
But there's a lot. It's like half the country.
Well, I'm not sure it's half. I don't think it's half the country, actually. I mean, to tell you the God's honest truth.
Because half the country is not that dope. You got to think about this, right? In other words, just stop and think. We just told you, Florida's a big state. They got a lot of people in Florida. How come they were able to count the ballots and, Michigan can't? I mean, think about that. Or Wisconsin.
I don't get that, yeah.
Yeah, I know you don't get it because it's very hard to get. It didn't happen. And this is what you have.
Well, I could hear I could hear Biden supporters saying, "Well, look, the Republicans control Florida State, and they rigged it."
What's happening here is that you have to demand. Going back to what Kirk was talking about in terms of the search for truth, you have to demand proof. You have to basically not talk to these people on the level of we're just having a nice fight about everybody's opinion, but prove it to me what you're saying. Really prove it to me, and believe me, they can't. You have to basically pursue truth at the highest level, and they're not going to be, because what they're doing is the equivalent of saying, I don't want to get shot. I don't want to actually have to stand for the country. I'm just going to fit in. All right, that's what you're telling me these guys are doing. All right, so the point is that the only way you can crack that kind of facade is by constantly confronting them with the fact that they can't prove a single thing they're saying. You have to be much more aggressive.
And then they could shoot back and say, well, you don't have the evidence. Where's the evidence? I don't hear it on the New York Times. They're the authority. What they say is true. I don't see anything. What are you, some fringe group?
That is not going to be a problem shortly. So don't worry about that. The fact you might have a day or two of tension, don't worry about it. The evidence is going to be there.
Okay, I hope so.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you. All right, can you hear us?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, just a minute. Let me get this together. Okay. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes,
yep.
Please say who you are and where you're calling from.
This is Ann from Reno. And I just have thanks for doing this. This is great. Ann Reynolds. And I have a question. There used to be a law saying that the airwaves belonged to the people, and it was against the law for anyone that was not an American citizen or a natural-born American to own a controlling interest in a media company. Can we get that law back? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes. This is Kirk Wiebe. I'll take a stab at that. Yes, we can get that back. In fact, I was thinking the same thing, that we need to take a fresh look at policies governing communications, ownership, things we consider dear and important for the effective communication of truth. And so, I don't have the Federal Communications Commission guidelines in front of me, but I do not doubt what you've just said. And so I think we can get that kind of thing back, but it needs to take a fresh look, and we have to have people in the executive branch and in Congress who are interested in ensuring the free flow of ideas and the free flow of information.
Yeah, because that would make a huge difference, and that's the only thing that will make a difference in terms of the media, getting the media back. If we demand that they're Americans, then we won't have this control on the part of the financial elite.
Yeah. If I can, this is Bill. I remember back when I was in working for the U.S. government in the National Security Agency that we had a group of people somewhere. I think it was in Commerce or maybe in the Department of Defense, but or maybe multiple places. But they would review every foreign request to purchase something in the United States, whether it was equipment or technology or whatever. And they would do an evaluation as to whether or not it for example, in the Department of Defense, they would look to see if it would involve national security, commerce, maybe some kind of problem with commerce, worldwide. But those things existed back then. I don't know what happened to them.
Well, it was one of the things that Reagan did wrong. And he allowed it in the name of business-friendly activity.
Well, yeah,
and I know that because I met a guy who was a cab driver in D.C., and he drove the guy to meet Reagan, who was pushing this. That's the only reason I know it.
Okay.
But well, I remember the
name. As I recall, because I was an advisor to the Foreign Relations Council, and that was something that we had even back then. So I don't think it happened when that guy said it did. So. I don't know what happened to it.
The initial part of it. There was it was crept up. At first they were allowed a partial interest, and then it crept up, and then I think under Colin Powell's son, when he was involved in that, he allowed greater and greater chunks of it to go by in the night.
Yeah, sounds like you definitely blame it on Powell's son. I'm going to go into the next call. Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. All right. Can you hear us?
Barbara, this is a question for you. Are you there?
I'm here.
Barbara, this is Mary from New Jersey. I want to deal with what's going on right now. How do you get involved with the color revolution?
How do you get involved with it? I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your question.
Well, you said we need to do something as citizens, and you were talking about a car march demonstration, something to get involved in this situation that's going on with this election, to speak out.
He means the car revolution, not the color revolution.
Right. Okay. There we go. I mean, we're basically going to be suggesting that this happen to the various groups we're in contact with all over the country. We're going to, to the Trump people, we're going to basically be telling them you need to not necessarily go pound on the doors of where the vote is getting counted, although that should happen, but you should be doing, something which is hugely out there. And what tended to happen, prior to the election is really quite organic. What would happen is somebody who was supporting the president would go down to their local newspaper, and they would say, "Hey, I have a Facebook page. I'm setting up a Trump rally. If you want to be in it, contact me." And so what happened is all these people would go to the Facebook group, and they would sign up. And then they'd say, meet at such and such a place, let's go. And people would come with their cars decorated. They would, bring food. They would, have a good time.
Yeah.
Which is essentially what happened.
Involved in that. I've already been involved in that. What I want to know is right now what's going on with this election. You're saying let's do something about this now. What is there somebody that's got something going on now to get involved?
Well, you got to investigate that. You got to think about who's the Trump people, and you got to talk to your neighbors. You should find out. Take a look at the rallies that actually occurred already in your area. Who organized those? Call them up and say you should do it again. That's what we got to do. We got to get out in the streets and actually show that we have an overwhelming presence. The other thing we've got to do is that we've got to, be the pitchfork brigade exactly as I said, going after Congress and saying, you have to get involved in this fight. You can't have the president doing this alone with his family and with the people who essentially support him. And this word has to get out. You guys in Congress have to demand it. Break the censorship.
Okay, so
Also,
there's nothing on your end that you have something going on.
No, we're just organically beginning to organize this. But what I'm trying to get across to you is you could actually do it also. I mean, there's lots of these car rallies which occurred in New York and New Jersey.
Yeah.
And if you just go back over and look at the coverage of them, you'll see who organized them, and you should just get in contact with that person and say, hey, it's time to do it again. We need to have an overwhelming presence going on with these things.
I have one more question. You talked about Millennial Millie. Is that a person that's a good person or a bad person?
She's a little weird, okay? I follow her site. She has some people on it who, at various times who some of my other contacts think are a little bit crazy. But at the same time, what she's done in this particular instance is a huge public service, however this thing came about, because it exposes the entirety of the operation, which was set to go off in Washington, D.C. And you can see if you look at my thing, which I posted on LaRouchePAC's website this afternoon, it's called Let's Now Defeat the Color Revolution in Progress. I actually have the link to that video in the article itself.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Okay, can you hear us?
Hello.
I want to unmute. Okay, go ahead.
Hey, this is Tom in Florida. And this is in reference to what Kirk said about hammer and scorecard. And I got some information on that.
Go ahead.
Sure. The hammer and scorecard was first used by Obama and Biden in 2012. And it was exposed in a courtroom of a particular judge, Judge Murray, in 2015. And it was revealed that scorecard was deployed by the Obama team against Florida election computers to steal the 2012 presidential election on behalf of Obama and Biden. It is now being activated and is being used in several states. Florida, it was used in Florida, Georgia, Texas, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, and Arizona, according to this individual, the whistleblower. Kirk didn't mention his name, so I'm not going to. But so it is activated and now being used.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Yep.
We'll go to the next. Thank you for calling in. All right. Are you able to hear us?
Hi, Barbara. Hi, Dennis. Kirk and Bill, you're becoming regulars on here. Thank you for spending the time with us. Quick question, kind of a housekeeping thing, but linked to the bigger question for both Dennis and Barbara. First timers, I was trying to get a little organizing people to call in, so I asked Tim if we could put the number and access code to this call tonight out there. I don't know how many showed up, but it's Mike Stetler in Christmas Valley, pardon me. If we were to, on our web pages, having a simple about or our mission statement or, this is who we are, what would that be? And then to Kirk and Bill, anything from back in September when Biden's campaign manager, I think his name's Dallas Jones, was questioned regarding ballot harvesting processes? And those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, maybe you guys
this is Kirk. I'm not familiar with those questions or his responses. He probably denied that it was a problem or belittled it, the proposition. But I can tell you, ballot harvesting is alive and well.
Okay.
I can't, this Bill, I can't add to much to what Kirk said. I just don't have any knowledge about that myself.
Okay. And Barbara, you want to answer?
Well, they think that ballot harvesting is counting every vote. That's what they mean by that. There's a big semantic debate going on today where the Biden campaign says we want to ensure that every vote is counted, and the Trump campaign comes back and says we want to make sure that every vote that's legal is counted. All right? There's a big difference between the two. As to a mission statement for LaRouchePAC, very simple one. We exist to actually bring the ideas of Lyndon LaRouche, who's the founder of this PAC, into reality in this world right now. And that's essentially the motivating feature of most of what we do on the website. And we always try and imagine if he were confronted with this particular situation, what would he have us doing? And pretty much the kind of thing which we're doing right now is very similar to something he would have us doing.
This is Kirk, may I suggest that those not familiar with Lyndon LaRouche's writings and proclamations, that someone summarize the essential bullets so that someone can come to the website, get a good feel for what those are, and then join in as an early member or someone who not as steeped in knowledge about Lynn, but at least has a beginning understanding.
If you sign up with LaRouchePAC, and that can be as much as an email, okay, or basically getting a membership in the PAC itself for however much money you want to donate, you're going to be introduced to Lyndon LaRouche in a series of what we call our welcome emails, which actually are short videos which go through who Lyndon LaRouche is, I think in a much more effective form than writing some form of mission statement, although we're in the process of redesigning the site, and we'll have something like that now. But we generally give people a series of welcome emails that says, here's who we are, along with a video and an introduction to Mr. LaRouche, in a series of, four small videos introducing LaRouche's ideas.
Okay, and 10 seconds. In your article about the laptop from hell, you referenced a question from your husband to then candidate for President of the United States, Joe Biden, about the tuning, right, harmonic tuning, but he didn't answer, and he came up, oh, you're a LaRouche supporter. Could you speak to your reaction at that time about what he said?
Well, it wasn't. I mean, my husband's reaction was that, well, that pretty much sums up Joe Biden. And he's, every time I actually reference that conversation, for people who don't know, my husband confronted Joe Biden in New Hampshire right before Joe Biden dropped out of the campaign by asking him a question about LaRouche's current campaign for the Verdi tuning at C equals 256. And Biden, when he was asked that question, was at a fundraiser, hemmed and hawed, and sort of danced around the question. And my husband reminded him that he had asked him a question. And Biden virtually exploded, and he said, I know Lyndon LaRouche. I've studied him. And the problem with LaRouche is he thinks the American people are a lot smarter than they actually are. That pretty much defines Lyndon LaRouche. I mean, in the sense that it creates a paradox for Biden, which he had to answer honestly as to who he was, which was fairly typical of how Lyndon LaRouche liked to organize people. So that was shortly before Biden dropped out of that presidential campaign because he was caught plagiarizing a speech from Neil Kinnock, Lord Kinnock, from the Labour Party in Britain, which tells you another big aspect of Joe Biden. Lord Kinnock is one of his biggest supporters at this particular point in time. He just steals everything, and he thinks everybody is stupid. He's a cynical grifter, basically, at heart, and that's what he's about.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Kirk. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Dennis.
All right. Very good. And now Biden has stolen his own mind from himself. All right. We're going to go to the next person. All right. Can you hear us?
Hi, this is Ed from Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Can I be heard?
Yes. You can.
Okay, and this is a great discussion. I want to thank everybody who's working with us and about this idea of truth. Of course, you go to a rally, you're confronted with the fact that there's thousands of people who come out of the woodwork because normally they're hiding. The silent majority has got to get active. What I wanted to say is that I first learned about vote fraud back in 1975 in East Orange when we were running for city council, and we all voted on the same machine. We were doing poll watching, and when they opened up the machines, there was only one vote on the machine. So we had concrete proof. But everybody doesn't need to do that to know that that's true today, because the Democrats have been doing that, and not just probably, but for a long, long time. But the other thing I want to say is that we really need a leaflet on the website about the current situation. And I noticed that we used to have a lot of leaflets on the website to LPAC under leaflets, and that's sort of tapered out lately, and I'd like to get them back on there so anybody in the country can get a leaflet printed out the same day, the current topic, and get it out to people in their area. I ask you to do that. Can you do that, please? And
absolutely.
The last thing is I want to salute the websites like Gateway Pundit and a lot of other independent people who are reporting stuff, which gets out information that is not available in the major media. It's being blacked out and censored. And I just wanted, this is a great service that we have these, initiatives being made by independent citizens, and that's the only way we're going to win this country back. If a lot of people get that idea that they've got to take responsibility to get the truth out. So that's what I wanted to say, and I'm glad you're going to get leaflets out, and should keep doing that. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Very good. All right. Okay, can you hear us?
Good evening, everyone. This is Marcel from Manhattan, and I have just a very short series of technical intelligence questions. I guess Barbara would be best to answer, and then a comment. So my questions are, well, in Georgia, it was either in Georgia or in Michigan, in either the late evening or the early morning of election night, they showed, I believe it was on Fox News, continuing throughout the night, they showed this video of a woman from some county. I don't know if they mentioned the county or they just said she was from some county outside of Atlanta, with a police escort, I think sheriffs and so forth, an escort coming in right to the main vote counting headquarters, what was reported to be a zip drive, and delivering it. This was right before that 4-hour gap that Barbara spoke of, I think, or it could have actually been during the gap. I don't remember the exact time. And and then somebody else had mentioned that they saw a similar thing that was caught on video in Michigan. And these were right around the times where the vote totals, were already going up in Biden's favor, and they either swung from one side to the other or something of that sort. So, I mean, I don't know if anyone, Barbara, if you may know something about that. And also, I had heard that there was about 100,000 vote dump in Wisconsin as well. So those are the intelligence questions I have. Now, a quick comment in terms of putting a lot of things together. It seems to me, and I've been thinking about this, that Donald Trump, with his willingness to fight the establishment, fight everyone around him, from the party he adopted, the opposition party, and everyone, he basically gave us a 4-year reprieve to get our act together as a citizenry. In other words, Trump inspired us. And the question is, as American citizens, what have we done with that inspiration that Trump has given us, in fact, over the last 4 years, to strengthen our country, to strengthen our presidency, to be better able to do what our Constitution calls on us to do? And it seems like, we've put on our little mini skirts, we've waved our pom-poms, we've been cheerleaders, if we support Trump, and some of us even deride him, well, I support him, but he shouldn't have said this, he shouldn't have done that, but we've really done nothing of, what we should be doing as American citizens, and this is why we constantly pay the price. So it just seems to me, very quickly, Trump used certain LaRouche policies. He tried to rejuvenate America. We cheered, but we didn't assume responsibility for using the 4 years he gave us to develop ourselves as real United States citizens again. Now, Barbara also illustrated earlier in the call that Trump may have saved some major checks and balances for us just in terms of saving the Senate. So Donald Trump has done a lot for this country, despite, the flaws that we like to sit back as armchair quarterbacks and pick apart. And, so the real crisis is not the real crisis is not about what's going on or what will Trump do or what will, the enemy do or what will the Congress do. The real crisis is in us. It's in our conception of what it means to be an American. And that's the idea. I mean, that we should be treating the country like we would treat our family. If we have a relative that's having a heart attack, we're going to get on the phone, we're going to call the ambulance. If it's not there in 5 minutes, we're going to put our relative in a car, get to the hospital, and demand that our relative gets the best care and do whatever it takes. We need to do that for the country. The citizenry needs to realize that's what we're required to do for the country, and that's what we haven't done. So I just wanted to say that besides the intelligent question, that's what's kind of, boiling up in all of this. The problem is not with Brennan and Comey and the deep state, so-called, or the British. The problem is with us. So I just wanted to say that. And then, Barbara, if you could answer the, questions about these zip drives and the dump in Wisconsin as well, if you're able or anyone else is able. Thank you very much.
Well, I endorse your statement wholeheartedly as to what it means to be a citizen in this particular period of time, and I think Lyndon LaRouche would endorse it also. It's a theme he came back to and repeated endlessly. And the question of education of our fellow citizens is really what this movement is all about. He said what you have to do when you're involved in fighting a people's war, which is exactly what this is you can't depend on giving recipes to your leaders. You have to teach citizens what we were talking about in terms of truth-seeking, what Kirk raised. That has to be something akin to a Socratic dialogue in every citizen's mind. You have to raise and elevate how you think about things. And you have to basically think, if being a citizen actually means I have to think and I have to figure out how, if I was called upon to be president, how do I actually make myself capable of doing that? And you got to stop being little, in other words, in the way that you think about the world if we're going to really succeed. And, Trump has a certain form of ruthlessness, which, is actually invaluable in terms of his capacity to have survived everything that's been thrown at him. And it's that quality of ruthlessness which we also must find in ourselves right now. It's actually taking a look at this situation, realizing where we are, realizing that we could lose the country in this particular battle, or we could basically, because that's the thing we're in, we could take the country back in a very, very big way. As to the specific incidents of vote fraud, I tried to stay up all night. I did stay up all night on Tuesday night. I didn't really see that because I was flipping back and forth between OAN, Fox, and Fox Business trying to get some kind of notion of what was actually going on. Most of this stuff is being sent to the legal teams, which, are actually active now with the Trump campaign and these lawsuits. And I firmly believe that what they're doing is they're looking at everything, what's going on with the bum rush propaganda in terms of saying they haven't produced the evidence, when you're putting together a legal case that's going to stick, and these things have to stick, it takes some time to actually accumulate your evidence. And I'm quite sure that they, particularly in Georgia, and in Florida, and in places where they have some control over things on a statewide basis, not in Atlanta, most certainly. But, I'm pretty sure that they're in a full court press to find out everything and gather it up and incorporate it into what they're looking at as a lawsuit. So I can't answer to specific incidents, and some of that stuff is really, very closely held at this point because, for obvious reasons, they're not flagging everything they know. Sidney Powell, by the way, just to talk to Kirk's point previously, I believe is beginning to take an active role in the legal team they actually are putting together.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Barbara. And I guess Trump has preserved the presidency against all odds, against all assailants for the last 4 years. So what are we going to do to preserve the presidency now? And I think that's the ultimate question.
Good. Okay. Very good. Okay, can you hear us? We're unable to get a... Hello? Okay, try unmuting and then call back. Okay. Can you hear us?
Yes. Hello. Hi. Can I be heard?
Yes.
Yes. Hi. This is Jose Vega here in the Bronx. I just wanted to give kind of a commentary report. There's a lot of demoralization going on by every hour, with every hour that passes in the some of these Trump forums and blogs that I'm a part of. Though some of the moderators of these kind of circles are doing their best to keep the optimism high. What we've been doing right now is we've been circulating a few things that were discussed and transcribed and put out. We've also been making various memes as well. They're not taking off completely, but on some cases they have 500 likes or upvotes in some communities, and these are just, silly memes of how can there be more, how can there be dead people voting and things like that. You'd have to see to understand. And it's possible they've taken off already, but we're just continuing to circulate this and push this out there, so that one, people are aware that there is some kind of fraud going on, and two, the mainstream media, I think MSNBC and a few others, stopped streaming President Trump's address that he had this evening at 6:30, when he started talking about the election fraud and how he's filing lawsuits in these countries. In these states. So I just wanted to put that out there to let people know that if they're not actively right now telling everybody what they're hearing on this call, and encouraging people to read or subscribe to the daily alerts, or even just sharing and sending them clips from the things we've done and things that we've written that address what's going on, I think that we should. Because right now we have to keep the optimism high amongst people who are willing and ready to fight. So I just want to say that.
Well, before people answer, let me simply say this to everyone. The LaRouche Political Action Committee needs money. We need money to carry out this operation in particular, and there will be no time where that money will mean more than people contributing today, tomorrow, the next day. Obviously, the circumstance is as it is. I think the main point is not even keeping people optimistic. The point is you have to just keep people fighting. What really we need to make sure, the phrase we should put in people's minds, some people know what this means, is don't even. That is, you don't even finish the sentence, right? You don't say don't even think about defeat. The idea is don't even. What has happened is that the president, the election was won. Now the problem is what Kirk talked about. But the only way for us to efficiently deal with that, which works very well, is our publications, this platform, the actions in the street that the LaRouche Political Action Committee is able to do, somewhat limited by the COVID thing, but we're still out there. And most importantly, getting people incorporated into the fight, just like tonight. And so I just wanted to say that much before anybody else answers, just because I think that the raising of money and the giving of money and getting other people to give money, the reason that this becomes critical is we can't slow down. We have to accelerate. So so that was me, but I don't know who would like to answer Jose's question.
I think that Jose's got to improve his memes a little bit. Also, I always read the Babylon Bee, which I find quite hilariously funny, and some of the stuff they have in terms of this election is really quite ironical and quite funny. For example, why wasn't the vote counted in any of these states? Well, because every single person who was vote counting actually took outcome-based education. How did Joe Biden actually succeed in how did Donald Trump actually succeed in getting that vote? He distracted all of the left-wingers by actually setting up Columbus statues right next to the polling place. They have some really wild ideas, and it's a wonderful thing to have humor in this, because the point of actually thinking ironically and thinking humorously about what's before us is essentially how you get the creative juices actually rolling. So I would suggest you actually sort of look at some of their stuff, which is actually quite funny, but also politically relevant, and think about how you could do better than them. And that would be my basic advice on humor is enormously important. Mr. LaRouche once wrote a whole paper about something he called laughter, music, and creativity.
Just think about the image of Jeffrey Toobin reporting about the election.
You're never going to get past that.
There's just some imagery that's too priceless to let go, right? But that's the media you're talking about. That's the big bad, psychological warriors that we're up against. They're just jerk-offs. All right. Okay, so we're at the end finally. How about that? Looks like all the questions are gone. So let's take some summary or anything that needs to be said. Bill, you have anything you'd like to conclude with?
Well, I mean, the basic conclusion is we have a real mess in this country, and it's been, the far left, I think, has been taking it to extremes and really subverting our entire form of government. So as far as I can see, the only remedy here is really the legal one. They need to be arrested and indicted and tried, or indicted and arrested and tried. And this will all be ironed out in the courts, and if they have something to say, tell it to the judge.
Okay, that sounds rather final. Okay, how about Kirk? How about you? Kirk, if you're there, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I was protecting you all from the noise in my background.
Was that the dog?
Just this. Someone just sent me an email that captured what Steve Bannon just did on the War Room program on Newsmax. And we were talking about morale and being uplifting. This is an interesting way to look at what's going on right now. Let me read it, please. This will only take 1 minute. Bannon seemed very confident Trump has this. He went on to lay out Trump's options, which were to act like he's president, drag Wray and Fauci in and fire them, call in the media to watch, then clean house, get his house in order, and then start with his second-term agenda. Bannon told everyone to go back to life. Trump has this. He's president. He won. Don't worry. Don't play the Democrat games. Don't buy into who the media declares as the winner. Their declaration is worth nothing. They have no authority. Don't sweat the lawsuits. If the Supremes reject the cases, ignore that. On December 6th, it will all go to state legislators around the country. They belong to us in most cases. In question, even the Democrat states. They will elect the electoral voters. Knowing how corrupt this election is, they will be convinced to elect Republican voters, electoral voters. That's kind of interesting.
Well, yeah, Barbara, I'm going to respond to that. But Barbara, you want to talk now, or you want me to say something?
Well, I mean, I agree with Kirk that it's something that basically is really being. I agree with the general tenor of the comments in the sense that you do not want to get caught up in the media's game, and demoralization always results from getting caught up in the media's game rather than actually saying what you're going to do and what you're going to push and how you're going to do it. So I think that's sort of correct. The whole issue of the Electoral College is being, pushed in Republican circles. I don't think that you can avoid, what is going on totally between now and December 6th to build that kind of momentum. And I'm not certain that that's the tack you actually want to take. I think that Trump has it, at least according to Bill Stepien and all of his people. They think that even with this stuff, they are going to be able to carry these states and that they have a clear path. It may end up that some of this stuff gets resolved in court. But I think what he's saying basically is don't get involved in the psyop that's being directed at you. Figure out what you're going to do and fight for it. Pure and simple.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, is that what you have, Barbara? Anything further, or?
Well, I mean, I don't like Steve Bannon, so that's a. I'm a little bit, the guy is ridiculous in terms of his relationship to China and his present sugar daddy and his actual, betrayal of the president at various points, and that's really where I put him in the thing. So, I mean, he's got some interesting perceptions and always has had them. He had the correct perception as to what actually is being directed at Trump by saying, first guy through the door generally gets shot. That's a pretty astute perception in the sense that what Donald Trump is initiating for the first time in years is a complete shakeup of this very sick and decadent government, which he was bequeathed by winning the election. So he's had some interesting insights, and I think that's important. But I think the kind of things which we've laid out here tonight actually are very promising in terms of particularly the business around scorecard, in terms of actually unraveling the whole effort here.
Yeah.
Okay,
so I'm optimistic about it.
Okay, yeah. I'd like to say a few things in response to all of this. See, I think that this is this is a situation which is not, in one sense, partisan at all, because you're talking about the nature of the United States. In fact, I would forecast that there are going to be people, including people who voted for Biden, who will reject what they did on the premise of what is now being exposed. Now, the reason I think that's going to occur, not that I think that is primary, but because we're talking about something which is at the very fabric of American life, not just the Constitution. It's not just the issue of the politics. This is at the very fabric of the question of whether or not truth matters. See, everybody's vote is denigrated, is despised, is violated by the usage of fraud. Now, the fact that this has gone on for many, many decades, and many of us are used to it, or many of us have had to adjust for it, to the point that, for example, those of us that were with Lynn and LaRouche just got used to the idea that Lynn never got more than 1 or 2% of the vote except under extraordinary circumstances or maybe one single congressional district. And even if he won delegates, they would be taken away. We were forced to adapt to that. But that was not only corrupt, that was fundamentally not just unjust. It was something that violated the very idea and identity of what was called an American. Tonight, what we're in and what we're actually seeing is not some partisan confrontation. No, it's something different. It is our chance, given that there's an actual president that's prepared to fight, as could have happened in 1976. that you can actually take the corruption that was there then, right at the time of the end of the Vietnam War, at the time when Henry Kissinger and so forth lurched through the halls of Congress, and various other obscenities were going on. And we had the problems of the church committee that the church committee had seen, and we come in. All of that could have been taken apart at that time, but it wasn't, because once the executive branch does not fight, then it becomes difficult for the citizens, no matter how valiant they are or right they are, to actually secure a victory for the nation as a whole. We are in a position to secure a victory for the nation as a whole. We can do that, not because we're so great, but because we're American citizens. I think if we pose that reality to everybody in the United States, so that what happens is people are caused to reflect on what their actual their responsibility to history is, then we're going to see something different happen in this country. And that can happen starting tonight, tomorrow. And I think that's what's important for the people that are on the phone, who should give money, who should get out the material you've just heard about, who should help get out things and distribute, including in leaflets, and certainly the notion of various forms of creative, nonviolent street activity would be not only appropriate, they would be shockingly, if you will, shockingly positive in the present circumstance. So I think that this is a message that people are going to be able to use, take out, deploy around. If we'd be interested in hearing any comments from you or any other things, either by text message, email, about what you thought about this call, things that you think you can get going. Again, for those who have actual physical evidence of, getting additional ballots, or, they experienced some kind of vote fraud, that would be important. Again, just short video, 3-minute, 5-minute video sent to us, which tells the story, the kind of thing that we might be able to use, as we've said before, for montage material, for some sort of a short we could put up, which would indicate some of this. These are the sorts of things that we want to create and do. So I want to thank everybody for being with us tonight. We went a long time, but I think it was definitely worth it. So on behalf of the LaRouche Political Action Committee, I want to thank Kirk Wiebe, Bill Binney, Barbara Boyd for what we did tonight. I want to thank all of you for the questions and all of you for listening.
This session is no longer being recorded. Goodbye.